time. But look, OK, let me just go back into history to try and just put this in context. The Italians now have a 10-year benchmark yield of circa 3.5%. In the first 10 years of this century, where the Italians had a lower debt to GDP of somewhere in the region of 90 to 100%, because as we do know, it was a much higher debt to GDP than any other nation going into the GFC, or the sovereign debt crisis, I used to call it as well. The Italians had, on average, and I'm amalgamating here, somewhere in the region of 4.5 to 5% yield on their 10-year paper as well. So when they had a lower debt to GDP, but they had equal financial crises and equal political crises, they had a yield which is roughly 1% higher than it is now. So why should it be 3.5% now, given the fact they've got equal political crises, but they've got a much higher debt to GDP?
Because everybody else has a much higher debt to GDP. I think the dislocation in the fixed income universe are humongous, and people are just trying to understand them as we speak. You know, the amount of advanced economies debt that has been issued from the US to Europe to the other OECD countries is huge because of COVID. So you have a very different starting conditions, if you will. And so I think that's why it's not 90 or it's not 100 or it's certainly not 60. That is the yardstick that we're looking at to define what we consider excess debt for a given country. It's just look on the other side of the pond. Look at the US, look at the UK. You know, it's very difficult to now say 90 was really bad then, now we are at 120. It's super bad. It's not true, because everybody's debt has actually increased between 10 and 20 percentage points.
Ludovic.
So it's a benchmark, it's a peer issue, because it's what then investors are ready to buy, right? And so again, there is so much savings that investors are ready to go into this debt, and there is a compression effect on the spreads, right? Plus, of course, the fact that everywhere in the world, central banks are now owning 25% plus or north of 25% of all of the sovereign debt. So there is still a compression on the yield that is coming from the who is owning this debt, which is the central bank. So that's why the yield is so low in Italy, especially.
My friend, let me get this right. The rationale for allowing the Italians to have potentially unsustainable debt levels is that everyone's got more debt. Well, that really reassures me for my children and my grandchildren. So everyone's doing it, hence it's better, yeah? And the other thing is, Ludovic, I don't know if you've noticed, but you're a young man, but there's not so many young chief economists around anymore. We're getting older as a population. There is more of a drain on those Italian postal savings, I don't know if you've noticed, but there's a demographic time bomb, and I can hear it ticking in Japan, even if Mr. Kuroda doesn't want to hear it. I can hear it ticking in China as well, and I can certainly hear it ticking in Italy and Europe.
Well, what I can see is, from COVID onwards, we have, depending on the zone, in the US, 2.3 trillion, in Europe, 1.5 trillion additional savings. I don't know about Japan, right? And even though inflation is wiping out some of these savings as we speak, there is still a lot of excess hoarding out there. So I'm pretty sure that this excess hoarding has to go somewhere. It's either deposits or it's what is considered still a safe haven, which is government debt. And it is a safe haven because of TPI, you see. Because TPI ensures you that there is no redenomination risk. So you may want the bond over the BTP, but the BTP is yielding slightly a lot more, actually. And that's the situation we're in. I'm not saying it's a good situation. I'm saying it's a new equilibrium.